rSlashMaliciousCompliance. Get rid of my vacation? Have fun replacing me. My meal must be salt-free. This story is from a dinner party I hosted before the pandemic. I invited 6 folks, and shortly after the invites were sent I received a call from Sally. Sally, not her real name, advised me that she was now on a salt-free diet due to medical reasons. She advised that at home she cooked without any salt and gave me a speech about how wonderful salt-free life was. I was skeptical and advised her that I would personally find it difficult to give up all salt. Was she sure she wasn't just on a low-sodium diet? Sally advised that unless her dish was salt-free she wouldn't be attending. While telling her no was an option, I'm not that person, see my previous Malicious Compliance. I was pissed off at Sally for years of being difficult at the dinner table in restaurants. Trust me, there was always something wrong with her meal, or its preparation, or the flavor, or the waiter, or... With a smile so large you could hear it through the phone, I assured her that her request for salt-free was 100% going to be accommodated. On the dinner night I prepped the meal. Sally was getting the same thing as everything else with one critical difference. All of her food was prepped in separate containers, baked on separate racks, and seasoned with exactly the same flavors sans salt. Dinner time and my guest arrive. I have all of Sally's food plated on white plates. Everyone else gets gray plates. First round. Appetizers. Fried calamari with a lemon jalapeno butter sauce. This dish typically has salt in both the batter and the sauce. As Sally couldn't have that, I battered her calamari in salt-free seasonings and flour. Her condiment looked exactly the same but was made with unsalted butter and no added salt. I place Sally's plate in front of her first and she immediately states she asked for salt-free. I assure her that her dish is salt-free and I made sure to cook hers separate and even use a different colored plate to keep it straight. We all sit to talk and enjoy the squid. Sally takes a bite and makes a face. Mine has no flavor, she exclaims. All of my other guests tell Sally it's divine, delicious, best they've had, etc. I smile at Sally and assure her that her dish was flavored exactly as everyone else. The only difference is that she received absolutely no salt. It's at this point that Sally has a moment of clarity. It's painfully obvious on her face. She realizes she can't complain about the lack of salt as she's already told the table about her salt-free life. She also can't claim it tastes terrible if everyone else is raving about the food. She literally looks like she was about to cry at the table. As my guests enjoy their dinner, Sally is slowly doing the toddler plays with her food munch and pushing her calamari around the plate. After a few moments she reaches for the sauce that I made for everyone else. Sally, be careful, the salt-free sauce is in the white bowl. That one has salt. She mumbles something about wanting to taste the difference before literally dumping the bowl on her calamari. She then exclaims how much better it tasted. You and I know that, of course, things taste better with salt. So this drama repeated itself over the main course of honey-roasted salmon with pine nuts. I also am no heathen and had both salt and pepper on the table for my guest. I'm not going to judge you for needing more flavor. Here we go. Sally takes a bite of her fish and once again realizes that it has no salt. She reaches for the salt shaker and conversation stops. Another guest asks Sally if she was okay with adding salt to her food. She says that she can occasionally have salt. She proceeds to shower her fish with salt sprinkles. I also bake some cookies for dessert. The dough uses a little salt. I made sure to whip up a separate batch of cookies wrapped to go for her. Salt-free, of course. When I handed her those cookies, the look of defeat that hit her face warmed my heart. Dinner is over. Everyone is happy except for Sally. I called her the next week to make sure she was okay as she's consumed sodium at my party. Sally told me her doctor has removed her sodium restrictions and she won't need that accommodation at future meals. On the phone I congratulate her for her good health. When I hang up I laugh until my sides hurt. Salt-free life apparently doesn't taste good when the salt is actually omitted. Note: to any on a low or no sodium diet, for their health I commend you. Sally, however, wasn't actually on this diet. This is evidenced by her shock at how salt-free food tasted. I confirmed with her husband that she's never stopped using salt at home. Her salt-free claims were a ploy for attention that backfired tastelessly. TLDR. Sally lied and stated she required a salt-free diet. She is defeated and miserable when forced to eat salt-free food. Common question: why are we friends? Sally is married to one of my best friends. As my friend has elected to stay married to her, I have tolerated her. I wouldn't call her a friend, but we are where we are. Comment. I'm loving the responses here. I truly empathize with those living with medically restrictive diets. Life is hard enough without that being added into the mix. This is funny and I'm sharing it with Sally's husband. He needs to get some first-hand knowledge of all the reasons claiming false dietary restrictions just isn't okay. And I want to be clear. Never tamper with someone's food. This MC worked because no harm could come to Sally. Damn it, I wanted attention and sympathy, not salt-free food. She wanted to be served regular or simply low-sodium food. Then she wanted to complain that it was too salty for her, and pretend she's sacrificing her health and being an accommodating guest by eating it. So she looks benevolent and also is the center of attention. It never occurred to her that you would go through all that effort to make zero-sodium versions of everything, because she'd never do that for her own guests. Exactly right. If someone is on a medically prescribed diet, generally they're unhappy about it. If someone just read some shit on Facebook and wants to appear trendy, then they'll recommend their new diet to everyone they meet. That's how I am. I have celiacs. I freaking hate it. If I'm lucky enough to find a sandwich shop that even offers gluten-free bread, it's still $2 extra for bread that tastes like shit. I refuse to say the phrase, I'm gluten-free. I only ever say, I'm allergic to wheat, for fear of being categorized as one of those Whole Foods idiot hipsters who eats overpriced shittier food because it's trendy. She literally looks like she was about to cry at the table. Should have cried over her plate. No, Sally, make sure those tears don't make it into your mouth. Savage, I love it. Why do you keep such a person in your company if she behaves like that? Does she have a lot of redeeming qualities? She's the wife of a close friend. My mother is on a low-sodium diet for health reasons, and often brings her own food to gatherings so that the hosts don't have to accommodate her special needs. We always make an effort to make dishes in a way that she can eat, but she certainly doesn't expect us to create salt-free versions of every dish. My mom was the same prior to passing. Her doctor declared limit was 90 milligrams daily. Take a look at anything in your pantry to see how insane that is. But she would also bring her own food to my house when she visited. And when I visited her, she would buy normal food just for me to consume. Sounds like a normal, non-sociopath person. It's just nice when people with restrictions at least think about how much work their diet puts on hosts. And especially when they offer to help. I have plenty of family members who are extremely lactose intolerant. For things like Thanksgiving, where there's tons of dairy in mashed potatoes, they'll just ask, please scoop out a bit of the potatoes before you mix everything together. I'll bring my own substitute ingredients and make the dairy-free version when I get there. This is why I've always thought, a person with actual medical needs is humble. They have workarounds, don't make scenes, and most importantly, don't lie. On first glance I thought you named her Salty, but then reread it and saw that you wrote Sally, and now I'm just disappointed in both of us. You sound like an incredible chef though. It wasn't until I got to the second time she mentioned Sally that I realized and had to reread that first sentence a few times. Either way, Salty Sally has a nice ring to it, and that's going to be my new go-to insult for a few choice people. You're being such a salty Sally. Sal is still salt in some languages. Hal would have been even more subtle. My grandfather got put on a no-sodium diet by his doctor. I visited him about a month in. He literally collapsed at the golf club. He was so ill. He couldn't understand why he felt like he was dehydrated. He was drinking plenty of water. The doctor said no salt. It couldn't be that. We sat down and had a long talk about salt intake in the body. Then we called up his doctor and got him approved to try low sodium instead. The difference within a matter of hours of eating some salted peanuts was amazing. He went from collapsing and being weak and sick to mowing his lawn happily. Needless to say, no salt isn't a diet they demand often at all, and for good reason. Salt is literally necessary for your body to function. There is no such thing as a no-salt diet. No added salt, perhaps. That's what I told him in our talk. I was hoping it was a misunderstanding, what with him being elderly, but when we called, sure enough the doctor stressed no salt at all. It blew me away. I took 1 year in nursing school and knew better than that. It was a frightening thing to run into. I'm so glad I visited before the harm became permanent and/or fatal. A hotelier, we get, well, got, pre-pandemic. A lot of guests who clearly stated on multiple occasions that they are celiac and cannot eat anything with gluten in it. They maintained this position right up until the breakfast table, when they would order the seeded brown bread, not GF, and standard sausages, also not GF. I would always ask, double-checking with them to highlight it contains gluten, and they had previously advised me they were gluten-free. 9 times out of 10 they would say their doctor said it's okay, just this once. I have every sympathy for people who are genuinely GF, and will always prepare GF if that is what is requested. I've tried GF bread, and it is truly disappointing. People who buy GF food because it's the current health fad, awesome. Those guys are helping to encourage supermarkets to carry those lines so that people who have a genuine medical need for them can also buy them. Supermarkets stock what sells, not what is medically essential. It's the ones who loudly make it a fashion choice, and cause hoteliers to buy perishable GF goods specially for them, then refuse to eat that GF food bought specially for them, that deserve ire. I get it. You want to be a special snowflake with a special diet, but you don't want to actually eat that special diet because you don't like the taste. Just loudly proclaim it in front of your friends, then have a quiet word in our ears later so we can pretend in front of your friends that the gluten-full sausages are gluten-free for you. You get to boast of your special diet to your friends while enjoying the taste of regular food. We get to not have to make special shopping trips and wasting money on your behalf. And everyone wins that way, because the wasted time and food doesn't then get passed on to the customers as higher hotel room prices all round. I think lying about a deadly allergy should be criminal. I have anaphylactic reactions to a few different things, and cinnamon is my nemesis. Every time I've had to EPI, it was because someone didn't believe me and gave me cinnamon anyway, due to all the people lying out there. My uncle was nagged by his wife for years about his high salt intake. She was convinced that salt was the devil, and he had to stop using so much of it. The thing is, he didn't use that much salt. Also, he worked rigorous, hard hours outside in the West Texas heat. He worked his ass off. So after a good couple of decades of their back and forth salt disagreements, it just happened that they were both in the doctor's office at the same time, to see different doctors for different reasons. My Aunt Kathy comes out of her appointment just as my uncle is being told, so like I was saying regarding your blood work, with all of the hours you're working in the hot sun, your hydration and electrolytes aren't where we'd like them. There are some steps we can take if we must, but first you should really try increasing your salt intake. Well played. I'm watching, controlling the sodium levels, and therefore inflicting it on the family, and it's possible through upping the other spices and herbs, but salt. Oh, glorious salt. And you know what, there are days where I'm having that fricking pizza with all the cheese, salt, and cured meats, so much fricking salt, and more cheese. And zero salt, to be frank, is impossible unless you cook everything yourself. Attention seekers, may they suffer an eternally saltless life. Go big or go home. The biggest thing you can do if you need to limit salt is to increase the acid you use to season your food. Citrus juice, vinegar, etc. My mom is on a medically necessary low-sodium diet, and this has made the most difference in making food that tastes decent that won't send her into a vertigo attack. Pretty sure I shared this in our Just Normal, but I offered to cook a turkey for Christmas meal. Hubs got a free one from work. I usually brine the turkey, then stuff the skin with seasoned butter to ensure a moist and delicious bird. Mill was so worried about grandfather's sodium and asked that I not use any salt. Anyone who's ever watched any cooking show knows that you have to season your food. And anyone who's cooked a turkey knows that without brining or other treatment, that sucker gets drier than the Sahara. So I did my best using a low-sodium broth and unseasoned butter instead of actual brine. It was okay, but nowhere near as good as my previous turkeys. As I'm preparing this and generally fighting the urge to give her a piece of my mind, she goes on about how they eat a rotisserie chicken once a week or so. A rotisserie chicken prepared at the grocery store with more sodium in one wing than I use on the whole turkey. So because I'm petty, I mentioned surprise that she gave that to him to eat because of the high salt content. Her words? Oh, it's fine once in a while for a special occasion. Woman, WTF is Christmas if not a special occasion? There's a reason that was my last ever stay at that house. She thinks it's less work for you to cook a meal without salt. You can just not add it, right? Then for her to shop without salt, I mean, everything has salt in it. Wonder why that is. I don't trust anyone who knows so little about food. If someone can be that oblivious about what they put in their mouth, it's not too surprising she's oblivious to other people's feelings, etc. So my dad suffers from congestive heart failure and as a result has to live as salt-free as he can or risk getting a heart attack. It's not easy to do and can be really frustrating. Everything had salt in it. You bake? Gotta replace the baking soda with some shitty baking powder that makes it taste weird. Enjoy going out to eat? Can't do that. Not unless you have enough wiggle room, no sodium all week, and even then you have to be really careful. You have to learn how to make good taste good without the most common seasoning in food and is in every pre-made food item. Props to my mom for learning how. It definitely was a learning curve. Lying about it, just to make yourself look better or just inconvenience the host. I hope she enjoyed getting a glimpse of what it's actually like because it isn't fun and can be really hard knowing you'll never be able to eat some of your favorite foods again because they'll literally kill you. What someone should have told Sally is that if she was truly on a salt-free diet, she would have learned how to compensate her cooking for the lack of salt. It took me about 2 weeks to lose the taste for salt. But this now means that I can't eat food prepared anywhere else, so I take my food with me. Also, you have to be pretty sick to be told to go on a completely salt-free diet. I'm currently waiting for a new kidney. It amazes me the length that people will go to for a bit of attention. And you're a better person than me. I would have left her salt-free and said, "No, Sally. I'll not be responsible for a deterioration of your health at my hands," and made her watch everyone else enjoy their meals. I think I may be evil. Get rid of my vacation? Have fun replacing me. I originally posted this as a comment on another thread, but realized it needed its own limelight. I worked at a company that gave out exorbitant amounts of vacation. Anyone who worked there for 25 plus years received 8 weeks of vacation and 2 weeks of personal time. This was a family-owned company, but rather large. We ran 3 shifts totaling 250 plus people. Enter Jimmy. Jimmy was a grizzled old man. He started at the company when he was just 20. Now he was 63 and gave absolutely zero shits. Jimmy also knew how to make a specific part for our product, him and one other higher up in the office. One day the plant owner comes out and announces he's selling to a corporation. He's older and ready to retire. He promises that there will be very little change and wishes us all well. The new company comes in and immediately goes after many of the great benefits we had. The first thing they do is cut everyone's max vacation down to 4 weeks, and do completely away with personal time. Anyone who's maxed out had until December 31st of that year to use it up, and they wouldn't pay it out. They then go into the office and clean house, firing anyone who's close to retirement, including Jimmy's backup. But they also do away with one very important rule. You no longer have to get vacation approved, you can just call in and take it. Jimmy is pissed, and they know it. They realize he's the only one in the building that can do his job now. So they hire a new kid for him to train, most likely to permanently replace Jimmy. So Jimmy does what anyone would do. He calls in the first training day for the new hire, and lets us know he's going to use all of his PTO at once, and promptly takes 10 weeks off. We had a back stock of parts he had made, so it wasn't too unnerving. But for 10 weeks, Jimmy went and applied to other jobs, found one, and started. Fast forward 10 weeks, it's the day Jimmy is supposed to return. He doesn't. For 2 days they try calling him, and even go to his house. He's nowhere to be found. Finally on day 3 he calls and resigns, and they lose their shit. The parts he makes are specialized and patented by the original founder. You can't just hire someone off the street to make them. What eventually happened was they had to contract the original owner to come in and teach some new hires how to make them, and when he found out what all they had done it pissed him off. The last I heard he charged them a 7-figure contract to teach them how to produce the parts, and they had to pony up, or close down. Moral of the story, don't frick with people's vacation time. Edit. Jimmy made an electronic control module that was sealed and stayed fixed in a poured unit made of a 2-part epoxy. Edit number 2. Jimmy didn't exactly miss out on a 7-figure contract and had zero chance to take one. He left, said frick and moved on. When they contacted the previous owner and explained the situation, it was basically a "you need my help. It'll cost 1 mil" type of conversation. Final update. Thank you everyone for all of the attention this received. I had no idea this would blow up like this. I have immediate family working with the company still, so if I hear of any more rumblings I'll fill you all in. Also, I worked here for 4 years. I have a few other Jimmy stories I may post at other times on the appropriate Reddits. Thank you all again. This is why even good capitalists are still not enough. The original owner seemed like a decent enough guy given the perks afforded to workers. But those good guys retire and die. Then cold bullshit takes over. Not exactly the same, and definitely not as nice, but Wegmans is a similar story. They used to be one of the best companies to work for in the country as voted by employees, which says more about how shitty most jobs are, but I digress. They were a family business and still are, but the bosses up to a certain point had worked at the store. I believe the grandpa founded it, and made the son work at the store like a regular employee. The son took over and was a bit of a weirdo, weird expensive pimp clothes, but again he felt some sort of connection to the workers and would at least keep them under consideration. This led Wegmans to have arguably the best staff of any grocery store. People were generally happy, especially when comparing themselves to workers at other stores. Anyways, the son gets old and retires, leaving his daughters in charge. His Ivy League-educated daughters who haven't seriously worked a day in their lives. They start changing everything, mainly cutting back benefits and replacing a shitload of full-time positions with part-time. Which then fricked over the scheduling of all the full-timers, as the schedules are defined by the part-timers' availability. The general experience has gone to shit as well. Things are messier, employees less helpful, etc. But profits are up, and instead of improving their current employees' lives, Wegmans is just aggressive opening new stores. I work at a place that gives only 2 weeks vacation and it renews every July 1st. No carryover. I have 5 days of vacation left. My mom was recently diagnosed with cancer and I have been trying to take 5 days off since before Christmas. Every second week I apply for vacation time and it's rejected. I am the only person in my plant capable of doing my job. They just canceled my vacation application for next week. I walked up to my supervisor at the end of the day and said that I am not showing up next week. You can either give me my vacation time or I will leave. I've now got an additional 5 days vacation because they are scared that I will leave. I worked as a ski lift operator at a ski resort in Colorado. Winter Park and owned by the city of Denver. The place in a way was in hurting status, all profits went to the city and all the lifts were old. But it was a fun place to work. We got to ski to our lifts and ski back to the locker room and could ski on our lunch breaks, and when slow one guy from a 3-man crew could take a few runs and get paid for doing them. Had a company 401k that the company paid into. We had barbecue grills at each lift and had some fun times. Denver decided to turn over management to a resort company. Came in and of course a lot of the big wigs were retired or let go. Barbecue grills went from charcoal to gas to finally being taken away. Company stopped paying into the 401k also. Some friends of mine were canned and I felt I was probably going to be let go next or basically just not rehired. I might have been kept on as I wasn't a supervisor, but after they fired some friends I didn't want to stay. Still miss the place. Many years ago my boss decided that the vacation thing was getting out of hand due to a similar policy. So he nixed all the bank holidays he could, took 5 days away. He did it right when I hit 5 years and was eligible for an extra 5 days. It was annoying and I mentioned how wrong that felt to me. After all, why not simply cap the vacation or hire more people if the issue was the old-timers having so many days off? But we moved on amicably. This year they reduced my bonus for the 2020 period after I delivered record results in the most challenging time for us as a company, operationally, not financially, and me as a person. Owners and management were also very uncool at times during all this. So I cleared some time, taught someone to cover the urgent day-to-day, which was always meant to happen, but I made sure, and told them, listen guys, I'm off to see my family for a month. That long of a break is kind of unheard of in this work, but my manager knows I'm pissed and didn't challenge me. It's really the owners who made things shitty more than him, and while I'm doing this for me, I think it's also sent the message that I and others no longer feel the kind of motivation we did before, and I think he actually sympathizes. Life is too short. Worked for a family-owned firm that had set standards for their industry. Purchased by a large outfit during the conglomerate craze, they came in and forced retirement on any manager who didn't have a degree. Similar to your story, they had an essential part that went through a time-consuming but critical test before it was added to a much larger machine assembly. No one in the new regime knew why they did the test, so they eliminated it. It cost them millions to service the machines put into service with the faulty part that failed, and it took them at least a year before they contracted with the former engineering manager to isolate and rectify the issue. As an old guy who has been a tech exec at dozens of companies, including being brought in on takeovers, let me confirm that this is so real. Not as bad as entitled next-generation owner whelps who haven't a clue about running anything and then go firing key people in a hissy fit, crippling the company. Both outsiders and next-gen owners have rarely a clue about the secret sauce that made the original owner so successful. Better than average vacation or share options make for far better employees. Alter that at your peril. I agree 100%. This guy started this company in his basement in the late 50s and made it a $500 million company. We had great benefits, great employer relations, and the lowest turnover rate I've ever seen. The new corp made it one of the worst places to work in the area. I still have friends that work there, and they just tried and failed to unionize. That's a still developing story for another day though. Apparently they crossed some lines and possibly broke some laws. Maybe karma will strike again. I once spent months building a forecasting model to forecast how many people we'd need to process varying increases in workloads due to an expected, albeit unknown, change to workloads. Was promised before and during the time I spent building this, that I was oh so valuable, and they had a positioning opening up soon which I would be a shoe-in for. Surprise, surprise, I finish the model, and shortly after an email goes round to my department saying that the role was being merged into another and given to someone else. I was understandably unhappy, both due to the way of finding out I could no longer go for the role I was promised, but also that it wasn't available anymore. I immediately started looking for jobs, found one quickly which paid more and had an easier commute, so handed in my 4 weeks notice. No one bothered to ask me to hand over the model I spent so long making, and even after telling my manager that someone needed to be taught it, when I left I was the only one who knew how it worked. Guess who got a call a couple of weeks after leaving because my old team couldn't work out the model? Told them I would explain as much as I could in 10 minutes, but after that they were on their own. At my previous employer they did something similar, messing with people's vacation, except it was announced mid-year in an all-employee meeting. Previous policy was an employee could roll over 120 hours, way too high emo. Mind you, new employees start with 160 hours and could work up to 280 hours by year 20. Well, that all changed during this meeting. Vacation was now capped at 240 hours to 15 years mark, those higher that were grandfather in. The big kicker was by the end of the year, you could only roll over 40 hours and by next year, 18 months out, would be 0 hours roll over. There was freaking pandemonium. Our department alone, engineering, new product development, had to burn an additional 560 hours, 7 people by 80 hours of vacation. Needless to say, project fell behind schedule and managers were pissed. But there was nothing they could do because company vacation policy stated that employees only needed to have vacation approved if out of office for more than 10 consecutive business days. Entire departments would take off for a week and just be gone. It was bananas. Edit. This is kind of blowing up. Wanted to clarify why I thought 3 weeks of rollover was too much. As a seasoned salary employee, I was earning 6 weeks of PTO and carry over 3 weeks, so every year I was out of the office about 12% of the time between PTO and paid holidays. People need to get away from work and enjoy life. Coworkers from Europe, I work in USA, would normally take 6-week holidays, vacation and not blink an eye. I ask for more than 10 days in a row off and people think I am out of my mind. I used to be lazy about vacations. I just didn't care or something, I don't know. My supervisor used to pass my office late in the workday and go, "God, take a vacation already." I finally started to use it more, but I still accrue a fair amount. I don't have kids, so I don't end up needing to take off days for family stuff. I generally take a few vacations a year, excluding holidays, and then a bunch of 3-day weekends. I was just off yesterday. We have rollover, but we can't roll over all of it, just a certain amount. I basically never dip into that number. I just use what won't roll. They changed the system at one point, back when we had vacation and sick leave and not just PTO, and whatever we had left was put in a permanent bank. It never expires, so I have that, too, but that's only for dire emergencies. Alas, we can't take our time as money, so, oh well. Ha was in the same situation, number of times sitting on over 1,000 hours. Was forced to take time off, so I got another job in that time and went back to work and had 3-day weekends ever since with the odd 4-day weekends when it built up. Some people got annoyed that they were not getting the same thing. But they also had lives. Edit. Used to work 7 days a week for most of the year. Similar story happened to me. I had a job at a struggling, small company that was eventually sold. I'd been underpaid by about 20% of MKT rate for a while and was really the only one who knew the processes or did anything that could be considered billable hours. I knew it wasn't anyone being cheap as they'd opened up all the books and I saw I was the only one who hadn't taken a big cut. Being underpaid was tolerable because I had a lot of schedule flexibility, a very, very short commute. The work was interesting science, and job autonomy, and I got to bring my dog to work. I'd accumulated a month's vacation and was earning 4 weeks a year. Taking vacation was tough since there were so few people at the company. New company approaches my boss to buy. The new company didn't seem like a technological fit to me, but they wanted to expand into biotechnology but really didn't understand the field. They'd heard that bioinformatics was the future one too many times and needed some of that stuff. They did due diligence, as appropriate here, before buying, at which time I'd told my boss that under new management, I'd expect MKT rate. My boss did a magnificent sales job, apparently convincing the prospective buyer that what I did was actually the result of our marvelous software and machine learning process. New company never actually asked me about it, but the machine learning was actually me analyzing data and creating linked datasets. New company makes the purchase while I'm using a week's PTO between Xmas and the new year. I come back to find I'm working for new company keeps at my same old salary, starting me out at new hire 2-week per year PTO accrual. New boss says that we can negotiate, once he sees that we can bring in revenue. Resumes out quickly. First paycheck from new company comes in and I find out my accumulated PTO evaporated, as they didn't actually buy the company, just the assets, dissolving the old company, hiring all the old employees. New boss tells me that the PTO was the responsibility of the old company, that didn't exist anymore. The MKT rate offer comes in. I tell new boss I'm giving 2 weeks notice. Within the next few days, when he starts looking to train someone else, he realizes that there was never any machine learning, that our software required someone with advanced training to actually use. It was all just me doing work. He'd bought a worthless company. They magically, instantly find enough to kick up my salary 50% above what I'd been making and more than what I'd make with the new offer and give me 3 weeks of my old PTO back. I walked, taking the new job below the new offer from new company, but they start everyone with 5 weeks vacation a year, start and cap. They use other incentives to keep people around, and money can't buy me time. I haven't looked back. It was clear that new company's interests were to squeeze me at any and every point they could. For a year, I got regular calls asking if I could come in to train someone. In the next 14 months, they'd cycled in 4 different people who weren't qualified and couldn't do my old job and quit out of frustration. Jimmy might have considered forming an LLC as a consultancy contractor. I like sticking it to corporate douches as much as the next blue-collar worker, but he could have come in for several half days and trained his replacements at a very expensive rate. Should this rage quit harm the company, it's possible the idiot executives might decide to consolidate the branch and move the division to another state. Jimmy doesn't owe his ex-coworkers anything, but if you work with a crew for 20 years, maybe don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't get me wrong, Jimmy taking his vacation and finding a new job is the right thing to do. Not telling them ahead of time is also better for Jimmy. However, right when they are panicking the most, is exactly when you have the most leverage. That is when you offer the training contract. My dad did something like this. He and mom had planned a month-long vacation to drive across the country, and at first his company okay with this. He was going to have his laptop with him so if something major happened, he could deal with it. Only a phone call away. But as the time got closer and closer, they became less and less okay with his month-long vacation. Finally, just before he was supposed to go on vacation, they weren't okay with it and told him he couldn't do it. Obviously, you plan and book stuff if you were taking a month to drive back and forth across the country, Canada, and he wasn't going to just not do it. My dad was near retirement and had taken this job to putz around a little bit longer before retiring full-time. So, his response? Okay, well, I retire then. And gave his computer back and everything else, packed his office and then left for his planned vacation. He's still retired to this day. Don't frick with people's vacation time. Yeah, I have a similar story. A company I was working for got acquired by Big Corp. Things were okay, for a bit. They hired me up a new boss instead of promoting me to the position. Whatever. Anyway, a year passes. COVID hits and the big corp decides to get really shitty. To make sure nobody was slacking off, they implemented all sorts of new rules and shit. We started having mandatory 9 a.m. meetings. Our positions were retooled. I went from lead support to data entry jerk. Our old customers were informed to just deal. Basically a big pile of bullshit. Regardless, I kept plugging along. Eventually I post in my 15 to 5 reporting software that I'm getting burned, but it will be fine as long as I get the vacation time I was asking for, a month in advance and after a big project that I was a key member on. Monday rolls around and new boss says at the mandatory meeting that no vacation time would be approved. I told them it was the last straw and quit. So, because they were so intent on pushing this project through, they lost a key member. If they had just given me the time I asked for, unlimited PTO, my ass, I would have followed through on their shitty project. Had a new boss come in after having the same boss for 13 years. He implemented a ton of changes, including putting a limit on leave. 240 hours annual, sick, 30 days per year. Before it was unlimited. I've known guys to retire with an entire year, 365 days, of accumulated leave. When he took over, I only had 15 days of annual, but had 90 days of sick. He wanted everyone at 30 days or less by the beginning of the year, otherwise you would lose your leave. Annual was to be paid out, sick was lost. Some people raised hell, so he got a lawyer buddy involved. He told him that it would be in the best interest that he paid sick as well and start a clean slate with the employees understanding that sick days would be considered use or lose from here on out. After taxes, I got a nice check for $9,900. Not as fun, but I had a job at an investment-held company that owned sub-companies all over the country. As these companies were acquired, the central HR never figured out how to consolidate all of the separate vacation policies, so we at corporate had corporate-type vacation, decent, with no need for rollover. I was getting up there in hours of vacation available, because I basically don't take vacation unless I have something actually planned to do with it. One time I got a bit concerned and emailed HR to make sure it wasn't going to go away, and the email I got back still makes me laugh to this day. It should not go away. If it ever does go away, email us and we will put it back. Caps and all. Anyway, a couple of years later, they got on hard times and I was laid off. They paid me severance, as well as close to 4 months of accrued vacation time. The check was way over $60,000, and I got another, better job with higher pay 3 weeks after being laid off. Reminds me a little of my particular malicious compliance. There are some parallels here, but the situation was a lot different in being simpler. I had worked on a job for 2 years, attempting to complete a task I was not supposed to be assigned. When given the task, I was told that my work on it was limited in scope and with intent to hand the work off to a replacement developer. Instead, 2 different developers were hired and neither were willing to accept the task handoff. To work around this, the company promoted the second developer to a lead position to give him the authority to delegate the task to me. In response, I immediately gave notice of 4 weeks in an attempt to force the company to transition the task as promised. Instead, the company directed me to finish the work. One of the problems with the work was no defined acceptance criteria. I pointed this out and explained that without acceptance criteria, I cannot prioritize fixes, but they didn't care. So I used the first 2 weeks to burn vacation time, then told them the job wouldn't be finished. That finally compelled them to set up handoff meeting. 1-hour handoff meeting to cover the intricacies of combining data from 2 different databases that don't match data at a 1-to-1 level for any identifiable object. I provided a mountain of documentation in a thorough walkthrough of the process as best as I could in an hour. After getting no questions, I strongly recommended the following. If they got to a point where the code was not resolving data as expected and they were unable to identify where in the 12 scripts and nearly 15,000 lines of code I had written to do this, the best approach would be to start over with their own level of comprehension and rewrite it themselves. I then packed up my shit and left. 2 months later, my old boss calls, tells me both of the other devs had quit and asked if I would be willing to get on a call to talk about the work because there was a problem they could not figure out how to solve. In response, I sent them a consultation offer for 10 hours of consulting at $150 per hour, that must be used or forfeited within 30 days, and that the terms were not negotiable. When they responded with an attempt to negotiate, I doubled the rate and reminded them that I was never hired by that company to begin or complete that job, and I don't intend to do either. My consultation services would only to be to discuss the logic needed to write the transforms. Last I had heard, they dropped support for the feature I was not asked to develop. I worked for a company where they didn't pay overtime, just comp time. We often worked 60+ hour weeks. Forget asking for time off. But time comes I need to take time off for my son's minor surgery. Shouldn't be a problem because I have plenty of leave, seriously like a month, and I was only there for 8 months, right? But no point in giving leave if the employees are never allowed to take it. They also tried to screw many employees out of their 20% perfect attendance bonus, but I digress. So I finally just tell them I'm taking leave. All kinds of implications they didn't like it and that we would be having a serious discussion when I returned. Thing is, I lined up a new job and started it 3 days into my 32-day leave. I continued getting paychecks while on leave and working my new job. Also turns out that 1 week into my leave 2 other staff members went on leave, citing they couldn't really do anything without me there, and they also didn't come back. So the moral of this story, children, is that money talks and disgruntled walks. I worked at a place that got bought out by a corporation. Pre-corporation, it felt like family. For decades, no one had ever been laid off, even in hard times. Lots of benefits and fun. It was a great place to work. People who left often came back because they missed it. Corporation buys us. We keep doing what we do and have a really great year. Winning one account after another. This has nothing to do with the corporation. We never see them, they're in another country. Eventually, they're putting offices in closets and putting cubicles in the halls. We're having such a good year. Christmas time comes. No bonuses. First time ever. Even though we'd been working our asses off to keep up with all the work. Shortly after that, they have a big company meeting at a hotel. Never did that before. They tell us our goal is to be 10% more productive and 10% more efficient. Translation. They laid off 10% of the staff. Even though we hadn't lost a single one of the new accounts. Even though everyone had more work than they could handle. Soon after that, people who had been with the company for years started leaving. The higher-ups started infighting. The vibrancy and family feeling of the place was sucked out like a tormented soul. Then we started losing accounts, etc. But hey, the shareholders made a profit, so it's all good. We had something similar back in the day. Corporate decided they were trimming everyone's vacation down to 5 weeks or less. Turns out there are a ton of people that have been with the company for over 25 years. These are also the kind of people that even when they take vacation, their phones ring the whole time. Q networking old dog. He has some 500 hours of PTO accrued. They say around March that he has to use it or lose it by December. The first time he took vacation, they called him every single night to fix a different outage. So, when he returned from vacation, he put in his 2 weeks. In NA, PTO is basically part of your salary, and unless you get fired, they must pay it out. So he got a really nice little severance package. Then, when his COBRA insurance was about to run out, he came back and took his old job back, but with some nice updating to his stagnate salary. And since he was not gone very long, he did not lose any seniority. Strangely, he is able to take his 5 weeks of vacation a lot easier now since his return. Nice. You have made it to the end already. Thank you for watching. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so, as there will be more videos like this in the near future.